Okay, so we are going to begin with our Kata Specialization series. So our first Kata series that we want to show you guys is the Naihanchi. So part one, we're going to do some strength and conditioning drills, specifically to manifest Naihanchi within a clinch or in a sparring situation. In part two, we're going to show specific partner drills, applications of the Kata, and also how are you going to apply this in sparring, self-defense, or any real life situation.
What we're doing here is mimicking this technique. It's kind of mimicking the Anashi Barai from Naihanchi Shonan. And you want to keep in mind, like this band that I'm using is pretty light. You don't need something really heavy. It's just kind of mimic a little bit of resistance because you're obviously going to need some resistance when you're trying to like sweep somebody's leg, right, or picking it up. So what to do with your hands, right? You want to make sure like all this is stable and firm, but your hands in the kata, you're doing this kind of a number, right? So it's kind of here and then pushing at the same time as if you're trying to push your hands, dragging over your opponent, whether you have their gi this way. Another way that I like to kind of do it is mimicking this kind of a deal because it kind of feels to me like you're pulling down and pushing through, kind of very similar to when you do it, use it in judo. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you're doing this kind of movement, you might also think about the fact that you will also be falling forward, right, or to your side or on top of the person. So you guys keep that in mind when you're doing it, that you're not going to try to mimic it exactly, right? This is just to kind of create some resistance and help you develop some strength in this stance and moving in there comfortably. And also kind of like helps with the fact that you have this resistance pulling on your legs, so that you know you have to be able to, I don't know, reset yourself like when you come back down, right? So that tugging kind of helps with that.
The next drill we want to show you is a typical plank. So the first variation is just having both elbows on the floor and just holding yourself here. You want your belt low to the floor and your back straight as possible. This is to mimic this motion here in the Naihanchis. The same idea is if you have one elbow on the floor, one hand up. This is the exact same motion as this, pushing to the side. And what you can do from here is actually push up to your hands and drop back down. That way you get used to being able to push off somebody that's closing in your distance, and also using your lats to hold yourself up, right? So you're using your lats to create a frame, and at the same time you're learning how to push off and create that short type of power here.
All right, so if you're not familiar with this object here, we have this kind of homemade gata. What we like to use this for, aside from like the normal gata type of swings, is to help with like developing rotational torque, or just, but you kind of don't want to, you have to be careful with this movement because you don't want to exert too much force like of your spine, right? So you don't want to over rotate and you don't want to create too much rotational force and then stop like too quickly, right? So basically what we're doing is we're coming here and we're rotating and we're stopping, and then we're pulling it back, and we're stopping and we're pulling it back. So you want to think of this as like a push, and then you're pulling it back this way. And you know, keeping your arms kind of like, this is like all one singular, like kind of like framed area, right? So you're pushing and pulling it in, and pushing through and pulling it in.
Alright, so the next thing is a resistance band. You can find these pretty much at any sports and goods store. This has a lot of variety that you can do with it. The fact that it's a loop or it's two-handed. First thing is just to mimic different movements in the katas, right? So you pull this across and you punch, and it's going to help work on that rotational torque. Another thing is also to use it with two hands and push it as well. So you're using all these motions here to get used to pushing things in a certain direction. The same idea you could do by going underneath and through the loop and pushing it here as well. So these type of drills are helping you develop that torque from the side versus conventional karate punch that goes forward and back.
So another one of the things that we like to use for helping our core and also our legs with gata development and those kinds of movements are kind of like a mountain climber, but using these bands, so that you don't just, has like multiple uses, right? So kind of hook this kind of band, and actually you can do this kind of same thing with that loop band that Michael was using earlier. When you hook them through your feet, and you get to surrender like a mountain climber position, and then go like knee to elbow, or as far as your flexibility will allow, right? So you can make this as easy or as hard as you want. Being able to plant your foot there is good because it helps you like when you're trying to generate explosiveness. You can feel a lot of stretch, like in your hamstrings and all that kind of jazz. But you can also just pick it up really high, and that kind of helps create this tight force there because you're actually like kind of feels like you're pulling up from the ground and pushing down from the top, right? And that's kind of like very similar to the way you feel when you're doing Naihanchi Kata and stuff like that.
So the previous few exercises were using resistance and also forcing you to stop your momentum at a certain period of time, right? So after a certain rotation of your body. But things like a slam ball or a medicine ball that you can throw against the wall, it helps create that torque and also release at the end. So that way you can actually work on your explosiveness without any need for control. So this is a regular slam ball, and I'm just gonna slam it this way and just release. And just repeating that over and over again, you can notice you're creating this type of push, right? Again, notice I'm adding in the movements from Naihanchi to get used to that motion again.